The Aliyah reading this morning is from the letter of James, chapter 3, verses 1 to 6. Dakan agnerai chicharani ang the chaichado. Igorna makalchante indio. Ange gorna kalchante angna magnil darkin ngangwara kotamali. Alaknavich, Unamarai chani angna manamur. Moinjanandaran anilanamur. Amulay tanandar ingurnamu angora. Inguringuran, agnil ingaran ayuninuich. Dakan ingaran angana. Derkanuanta. Mora angwara angke indioan indem. Ingurinjana pakarai janki angar. Rap arai chalana mani angar. Artuanando arinyo eternari. Rampwala kilyain panaruna manando wala rakatwa. Ropal artnama. Atul roparin andurkala paindio. Nando elko araichalindio. Urnelko eternari. Ambwala kilyandang atu aindam atana maliwaril urnarin. Outa udnuwadi ambwala kilyalalpumalam. Urnelko araichang agnaindio. Kwachaledo. Alinyo anam eternari. Irkaichang kwarar mala indi. Akilyalabran ilkwal alkan. Ran up anki orla. Ikurla nandar angam ingurkingur nakalamal an puratananiyo arkandalam. Ran up laram akilya pinyar. Laram akilya tangwalampam rapambam elkwanam injurangwar alpibaram. Alinyan or alaram apinyarman. Alka kunanapampam ilpertulam. Alinyarana palungkwanam irum. Ingaran abmulianga. Urayan ulkoranap arin ilkon abmuratiar apichum.
The what we're reading is from James chapter 3, verses 5b and 6. Yanka kankulumilipini warlu wita yanka marnanga. Papamika papinja warner chu kilsiki ka pilsjarani. Mula janka chuka wa papangane. Jalan bacu nyampu leranga ngalipin yangalaka nguna warlu pijala. Ngau nyayanika. Nguna ngalipin yangala. Kular bale penyano nyarparlu jalan bacu wala pajikala. Machi wangkan jaku. Kucala cu kangalpa machi maninjala ki porame. Mialu manukali pejana machi wangkan jalu machi mani yapa ngalya karalam. Nyampu gucu kalipa yanka warada wankame machu. Kucalo yejala kalipa nier ningkitara machi mani. Ngor la. Narparang ngorlo kalipa kucaku pinari jarame. Ngor nyanong ngorlo cucu ngaung ku ngalpa pinari mana. Kuci kalipa machi wangkame.
Thanks, David and Steve. So we are, after a couple of weeks, doing some topical study, we are heading back into James, a book of James, which we have been engaging with over the course of this year. We've journeyed our way through James chapter 1, and then James chapter 2, and now here we are at James chapter 3. And in many respects, James chapter 3 is almost like a mini-series in and of itself, because it has for its central topic this idea of controlling our tongue. And I must admit, over this last week, I've seen the word tongue so many times it started to disturb me. It's just a really weird word. You keep looking at, there's those words you keep looking at and they just get weirder and weirder the more you look at them. Tongue is one of those words. So I have protected you from that for the most part in this sermon, and we're going to be talking more so about the words we use, because that one is a little bit easier to palate. But nevertheless, what I love about James chapter 3 and what I love about this entire series is just how practical it is for us as followers of Jesus, how much it challenges us to consider our own behaviour. And while, of course, we know that the gospel and the way of Jesus isn't about sin management, of course, that's not what the gospel is about, nevertheless, part of what it means to be that kind of light, so to speak, here in this world, that points people to Jesus and that introduces them to a different way, we do need to consider what it looks like for us to utilise the skills, the opportunities that we have to ensure that they reflect the heart of Jesus. And as I was starting this passage, and today we're looking at verses 1 through to 6, as you may have noted on the screen, we'll kind of go through them as well. It reminded me of a book that we have at home, one that my son, who's 4 years old, Zeke, he loves to read. And so I thought I'd share that with you. And so he's going to read it to you. We've pre-recorded it, and it's going to be in two parts. So there's going to be the first part at the beginning, and I'll give you the second half of this story at the end. But I want to introduce and encourage you to watch this little clip before we head in. This book is called Words and Your Heart.
Words in your heart. This book is about your heart. The little bit inside of you that makes you you. Will you listen really carefully? Shh. Because it's really important. And it might help you be a happy you. And the people around you be happy them. Just, you see, the words that go into your ears can actually affect your heart. A little bit inside you that makes you you. Your words can do amazing things. They can describe if they are big, or if they are little. They can explain stuff so you know that it goes whiz, whoosh, boom, or spin, tinkle, ping. Your words can make you happy and make you want to sing love. Sometimes words can make us cry. You know what sort of words they are. You see, someone's words can be like a deadly arrow. It can pierce someone's heart. The little bit inside of them that makes them them. And sometimes words can really hurt.
We'll get the second half of that book a little bit later on. It reminded me, this book, because the truth is that as we kind of stopped the book there, that words can pierce our heart. They can be like a deadly arrow. They can cause heartbreak. They hold this great potential for good and for evil. And I think that is one of the things that James wants to pick up on in this passage today. And we're going to really kind of treat this text at face value. We're going to allow this to challenge us individually this morning around what it looks like for us to consider our words. If you've got your Bibles, feel free to turn with me to James chapter 3. We will, of course, have it on the screen as well. James writes, "Not many of you should become teachers, my fellow believers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly," which is exactly the kind of intro you want whenever you're delivering a sermon, right? It's just like, okay, cool, yeah, all right, shall we continue? But essentially, like, let me just pause there for a moment. This is what he was getting at here. Okay, he's not saying no one become teachers. He's saying not many of you, right? And it's not because of some kind of exclusivity clause. Essentially what he's getting at is you will be held accountable for your words. That's what James is talking about here. It's like if you want to become a teacher, and that doesn't just mean preaching from a platform, by the way. If you want to be someone who disciples other people, if you want to be someone who leads other people in the way of Jesus, which we are all called to do, right, then we need to be accountable for the words that we say, because the way that we use our words and the influence we have on other people actually matters. It really does matter. Let's continue. We all stumble in many ways. Anyone who is never at fault in what they say is perfect, able to keep their whole body in check. So again, I'm just going to pause there. James is pretty honest to say, hey, we all stumble. We all stumble in many, many ways, but he wants to identify one particular way that he needs to raise to our attention. And he says, but anyone who is never at fault in what they say is perfect. Now, of course, that's nobody, all right? But what he's highlighting is that what we say, how we communicate, matters. When we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. Or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder, wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue is also a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. Whew! Do you think that James is getting at something here, right? I don't know, when you read that and you just kind of slow down and read that, part of you, especially that last little verse there in verse 6, part of you just wants to be like, I shall never talk again, right? Because it's like, it just kind of like, this is volatile. It's like I'm holding like uranium here, and it's like, and there's this sense in which I don't know what kind of damage I'm going to do, so maybe I just won't talk. But remembering that at the beginning of this passage, it says not many of you should become teachers. Yeah. So this isn't a sense of, hey, just become mute and just don't say anything. The big message in here is, hey, you need to be aware of how volatile your words can be, the influence they have. And there, with those words comes incredible responsibility for those who choose to share them. And he references hell, right? Which when here in the Greek is the word Gehenna, which was a real physical place, a valley of Hinnom on the east side of Jerusalem, where it was essentially the rubbish dump where they would set alight the rubbish, and it would be a place where there was constant burning. That's what it was known as. And so when you look not just at the significance of hell kind of in the bigger grand scheme of things, but this hell that was referenced as a physical location, there was also this sense of like, hey, you see the fire, you see the damage, you see the destruction. No one wants to go there. And just so you know, unless we keep our tongues in check, unless you keep this thing that we all have in check, there is the risk that what you see over there is also going to be reproduced in the lives of those you speak into. And see, we talk about the tongue and about words, and certainly back in James' day, I suppose when you think about it in the first century, a lot of it was to do with verbal communication. Of course, we do a lot of that nowadays. But I think it's worth us considering, even today, how the tongue takes on various forms. You could even argue that the modern tongue takes not only the form of spoken words, as in the words we speak over each other, but also what we write on social media or we tweet about. Our tongue takes the form of letters that we send to other people, right? The words we write, the articles we write. Words are far more than even just that, which is communicated verbally. In fact, we live in a society where words we know are prevalent, right? There are so many words going on and around us and about us. And there's so many things that want to provoke words from us. They're calling for a response, which makes the challenge of finding silence, reflection, perspective all the more difficult. And this wasn't just a James thing that he was aware of. In fact, Jesus was super aware that our words mattered too. In Matthew chapter 15, the Pharisees are getting all up in arms because Jesus' disciples aren't washing their hands before they eat. And obviously, good hygiene, recommend. But that wasn't the point. This was about the legalism of washing the hands, of what they would actually call baptizing the hands before eating. And Jesus, he gets pretty firm about this. He says, don't you see that whatever enters the mouth and goes into the stomach and then comes out of the body, it's like the stuff that goes in and then that comes out of the body. But the things that come out of a person's mouth come from the heart. And these are the things that defile them. This is where the problem's at. The things that come out of the heart, then come out of the mouth, and then into the world. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. Jesus is like, hey, these are what defile a person, but eating with unwashed hands, you're way off here. It's not what defiles them. And so again, Jesus, right, was picking up on this fact. It's like, hey, we need to be super conscious of what comes out of our mouth, because it has the potential for great distraction, has the potential to defile us. And so I want us to sit and just consider the two metaphors that James gives us today. It's got to be more like an object lesson. And I know sometimes you come to church and you want to see something in the Bible that maybe you haven't seen before. But sometimes we just need to read the Bible and be challenged by the original author, because we discover that it's applicable to us right now, at face value. And today, as part of that reflection for us, theological reflection, where is God in this challenge for me? As, remember, we'll continue on in following weeks. I want us to consider the different roles that we play in our world. You might be sitting here or joining us online, and you might have to consider this challenge of what it means to utilize our words and the volatile nature of them as a parent. Like, that might be kind of the area, like, I've got young kids. Right? I need to be constantly aware of the influence of my words and my tongue, right, on their growth and what that's going to do for them. You might be here and you actually need to think as a child. The way that you recognize and speak to your parents. It might be that you're sitting here and the lens that you need to bring to this is as a friend. People approach you. Your main relational contexts are those friendships that you have, and yet your tongue, again, is something that God wants to use but carries with it great risk, and therefore, what does it look like for you to apply this? You might have to think as a husband or a wife, or you might be a member of a team and you get out there on a Saturday and play netball, and suddenly your words change. They feel a bit different. This is a challenge that we have, right? Is to consider the fact that we all carry these different roles, and yet within each of them, there is this potential for our words to bring about great destruction. And this is what James wanted to warn us about. So first, I want us to consider today the run. Now, I get that we live in Alice Springs. We have Henley on Todd, but apart from that, ships aren't a big part of our life. Okay? But nevertheless, I think we can at least seen enough movies or seen enough pictures to kind of get this metaphor. He says in James 3:4, or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder, wherever the pilot wants to go. This is a great challenge for us to consider. When it comes to the words that you use, whether, again, as a husband or wife or a friend or a child or parent or team member, like when it comes to the words that you use, where are your words directing you? Where are your words directing you on a regular basis? We will talk a little bit about how our words impact others in a moment, but I actually want to start with us. around the words that we choose to use and how they actually affect our direction. Do the words that you regularly choose to use steer your life in the direction that you desire? Are your words the kind of words that are developing greater levels of peace and compassion and thoughtfulness? Are they the kind of words that are leading you into a greater sense of wholeness, where you're actually becoming more and more content and grateful for the world that God has given you? Or are your words actually steering your life, steering this grand ship, even if they feel very small, in a very different direction? Are the words that you use taking you toward maybe bitterness or conflict or suspicion? I talk a lot with people about trajectory in my chats with them. When they're talking about their relationships with particular people, you know, we all have times that are easy and times that are hard. But the question I always ask people is, in the grand scheme of things, where do you feel like you're headed? And for Christians, it's like, hey, do you feel like this is leading you to a greater, toward God, or does it feel like this is actually leading you away from Him? I'm far more curious, even though those moments matter, I'm far more curious around what end or destination you're headed toward. I remember back at one of my previous churches, I was part of a team. We were part of a youth team, so we were pretty young, and we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun, but we developed this culture where we would just we would slam each other. We would put each other down. We started just kind of like talking smack about each other, and it was all in the name of fun, right? That's at least how we kind of described it. You know, it was kind of like we kind of poked fun at each other and all that kind of stuff. And we'd been doing this for a while, and it just become kind of second nature. And that's usually what happens. Things just become second nature, and that's why James wants us to point out, hey, this stuff matters. But then one day, my boss, Mike, got the team together, and he said, enough is enough. And he was a part of it too, by the way. He knew it, right? But I'm going to give him credit for having the more maturity to bring us as a team to conviction faster. And he said, hey guys, where is this leading us? Where is this actually leading even our sense of self, like our contribution to this team and our contribution to this ministry? I mean, here we are laying into each other, and then we're starting to speak these things over ourselves. We're starting to believe them. And so we didn't have a swear jar. Thankfully, that wasn't an issue at our church. But we ended up having a put-down jar in our office for those times when we needed to correct our trajectory, correct the culture that we were developing within that space. And it made a huge, huge difference. Because suddenly we became far more aware of the direction and the destination that our words were taking us. And yeah, in the moment, they just felt like a small thing, a small adjustment. But particularly when it comes to those long-term relationships, remember that a small adjustment sets a far different trajectory than you might imagine. Yeah? Which again, places the rub on parents, children, some of these long-term relationships. Our words matter. What direction are your words taking you? What I love here is it says, wherever the pilot wants to go. There's actually a bit of agency in there, in this metaphor. It's like, hey, the captain or the pilot, like, they actually know where they want to go. They have an end in mind that they're seeking. Well, are their behaviours matching those desires? And I've said it here many times before, your direction, not your intention, determines your destination. And so we need to determine what is our direction, and are our words those kind of words that are filled with positivity, not for positivity's sake, right? Just because we're a happy person, but because we know that our words actually shape the direction of our life. And I especially want to put out there, if you're an external processor, be extra careful of this one, because it can really, it can be a real challenge to consider, even as we're processing things, where our words are directing ourselves or others. Let's just push into this second metaphor for a moment. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. And so we've kind of talked a little bit about, how our words shape our trajectory, but of course, it would be remiss if we didn't highlight the way that our words affect others. Don't point fingers. Jesus said not to. But we know that sometimes there are people who just leave fire scars wherever they go. Don't think about who it is. Take the plank out before taking out the speck, yeah? But we know this, and perhaps the person who comes to mind is us. Are you, through your words, setting fires all around you? Maybe you don't realise it. And this is what James wants to highlight. You walk through, you have an interaction with your husband or wife or friend, and you walk away from that conversation not realising that a spot fire has just started there. Or maybe you do realise it. Sometimes I chat to people, and they say this phrase, I just like to stir people up. Why? That's actually not okay. Do I need to point that out? Listen, that's just a weird power trip going on there. Okay? It's fine to challenge people, and people need challenge, and that's totally fine. Children need discipline, don't get me wrong, right? But just to stir up controversy and strife for the sake of drama and power and entertainment, man, fire, 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 fire. And that's what happens, right? And you know what often happens? We start the fire and then we leave. And the fire keeps on burning. And we might not be there. But our word has been planted in someone's heart or mind into a circumstance, right? And we've just let it go. We live in Alice. We know what happens when we leave our campfires burning, right? How quickly they can spread. The kind of damage that they can do. And so this is the question I ask. And again, this is just an introduction to these few weeks. And so this is why we're doing this bit of challenge. But I ask the question, are people better off following an interaction with you? Are people better off following an interaction with you? This is the kind of stuff that James wants to highlight here, and he doesn't pull punches. He's like, you've got this incredible potential, but it also comes with incredible risk. And James was one who was, hey, you wear your faith on your sleeve. You demonstrate your faith through action. James was not a, hey, let's get out of here kind of guy. He was, we need to engage with people. Yeah? But he says, as you engage, ensure that your connection with people through both your actions, but perhaps most importantly through your words, doesn't start fires. For a small spark can set a great forest on fire. And so again, you might be sitting here and going, well, that's a bit challenging. Is it worth the risk? Is it worth the risk then? Stepping into somebody else's life and speaking words over them. Is it worth the risk getting close to my kids or close to my partner knowing there is a risk? Is it worth it then? Is it worth being a person who's on mission every day? Which means that we can't just sit back in our holy huddle where maybe there's a little bit more forgiveness, but we actually need to step into our world and engage people where they're at and teach them about Jesus. Is it worth it? Let's hear the second part of words in your heart.
Your words have power. Dun, dun, dun. Your words can actually change the way someone's heart feels. You can see the heart. If someone feels sad, your words can help cheer them up. If someone feels weak, your words can help them feel stronger. If someone wants to give up, your words can help them keep them going. Make them giggle, make them grin, make them laugh out loud and roll around. You see what we mean? Your words are amazing and powerful. How about we all use our words to look after each other's hearts? A little bit inside of us that makes us ask, Let's try together and see the difference it makes. Today, somebody's world can be a better place because of you. Doesn't that make your heart feel good?
So, a nice simple lesson today. James says, check your tongue, check your words. There's great risk, and there's also great reward. But let's not just be flippant and go about our business, but rather let's recommit our words as parents, as children, as husbands and wives, as friends, as teammates. Let's commit our words to God once again and allow Him to shape our hearts and the hearts of others. Let me pray. Jesus, thank you that you've given us the gift of words. And while it can be scary to consider the impact that they have, and God, we all know those words that have cut our hearts, and we also know those words that have lifted us up. God, will we take this tool, this gift that you have given us, this gift that you have demonstrated, and not be starting fires, to not be steering ships in the wrong direction, but actually, for those of us with the courage to discover our role as teacher, as friend, as guide. And so challenge us. Challenge us in one specific area, I pray, where we need to adjust our words for your glory and for our hearts. In your name. Amen. I'm going to invite the team up. We're going to close with a song.